Good morning, NBT Nation. It is a Monday morning scheduled NBT Live. Thank you for joining me here in this holiday week, at least here in the US and many parts around the world. It's great to have you with us. Today, my friends, we are going to talk about how do you conduct training as a corporate trainer with your stakeholders. In other words, in a normal situation, stakeholder says, hey, design a training thing. You design the training thing, and you either give it back to them and they do it, or you go off by yourself and do it. But what if they say, no, 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 I want to be in the room too. I want to co-present. I want to co-train along with side you. And that's what we're going to unpack here in today's NBT Live. Scheduled Live. You're going to see more scheduled lives in 2026. If you like this format, let me know. Leave me something in the chat feed. Let me know what part of the world you're in. Also, don't forget, The Hard Truths of Becoming a Certified No Boring Trainer ebook launches very, very soon, before the end of the year. Clock's a ticking. It's coming out soon. Can't wait for you to get that. So thank you for joining us here at NBT headquarters. All right. So your stakeholder, if you find this topic interesting, by all means, please like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Let me know where you're from and all of that fun stuff. So, excuse me. Sorry about that. A unique challenge for sure when your stakeholder says, no, I want to participate in the training alongside with you. I want to co-present. Now, instead of you designing the training and just handing it back to them, or you design the training, they sign off on it, and then you go do it by yourself. Now you're with them. They're going to be participating with you. They may not necessarily be trainers themselves. They may have different opinions about how different things are to be done inside the organization than maybe you would handle them inside the organization. How do you navigate all that? What do you do if you have multiple stakeholders, multiple people that want to participate along with you? Well, my friends, I've just done a workshop oh my gosh, excuse me. Sorry, I'm fighting a bit of a cold here. We'll see how this works out here on NBT Nation today. So might be a short live. Anyway, I just conducted a training workshop with two stakeholders. And I got to tell you, it was fantastic. The one stakeholder, it was their idea for the meeting. It was their idea for the workshop. They approached me and said, hey, Adam, here's what I'm trying to do. What do you think? We partnered together very closely. That individual really, I am so sorry. That individual, really good, strong uh, person inside the organization. They really care about their people, and that individual and I really put together a great workshop. And it's from that this NBT Live comes, because that happens quite a bit, where we as trainers have to train alongside the stakeholder that requested the training in the first place. So what do you do? How do you keep that from going off the rails? And that can go off the rails in quite a few different ways. Either you and the stakeholder don't naturally gel together. The stakeholder might not be a great trainer, so they come into the room and they just want to tell everybody what to do, and that's not quite so good. If you have any history inside the organization or knowledge about how the job role that you're training is supposed to be done, you may have some opinions that are much different than the stakeholders. How do you navigate through that? And at the end of the day, it's the stakeholders meeting. How do you be respectful to the stakeholder in the training room and not undercut them and not take over? How do you give them room for it to be their meeting, but how do you keep it being a training scenario? How do you keep it a training session without them just going in? I mean, it's a lot of challenges, right? So let's dive in. Let's unpack them. How you handle all of that. Number one, how do you keep it from going off the rails? Number one, you as the trainer, you have to establish a very clear outcome, a very clear set of objectives from this session from the jump. You need to work very clearly with your stakeholders, whether it's one or multiple that you're supporting, and you got to define the objectives that they want to achieve from their meeting. What is it they're trying to accomplish? Get that laser focused, get that really dialed in, really documented, really laid out from the start, and get their buy in on those objectives. You've got to fight objective scope creep as the planning goes on. I'm not saying that you don't change the objective as your planning process as you go through the planning process. I'm not saying don't tweak it and adjust it, but you can't change it. I'm so sorry. You can't change it 1,000 different times. That is for sure. So you need to have clear, laser focused objectives. Number two, simplified design, especially if your stakeholder or stakeholders are not naturally gifted trainers. In other words, they're the kind of stakeholders who are just going to come in and lecture everybody and tell everybody what to do. Or they're not good at just sort of following your lead. They want to kind of take over the meeting, and it's not really going to be a partnership. Uh, go with a much more streamlined, simplified design. You're going to have two, three main points. You're going to have one or two very simple learning activities. Everything's going to laser focus back to that very clearly defined objectives, but you're not going to get too cute with your training approach. Things that you would do if you were the run all by your lonesomes as the trainer, you would do probably a whole bunch of different stuff. But if you're working with a stakeholder or stakeholders who are maybe not gifted trainers, keep it simple for sure. Keep that design really, really focused. And as of course is a core certified no boring training principle, you'll want to keep that design pretty basic, pretty clear and focused anyway, but especially when you're working with other people. So welcome to our scheduled live. Clear objectives, simplified design, keep it really tight, really crisp, really zeroed in. If you are going to be working with multiple stakeholders, which I just did here fairly recently, but that does happen where you might get multiple stakeholders in the room while you're trying to facilitate the training session. How do you keep the train on the tracks? You absolutely positively must non-negotiable must make sure those stakeholders are 1,000% on the same page before the session starts, because it's very common for those stakeholders to have maybe slightly different views. They may not be disagreeing, just have disagreements, but they might look through a different lens. And the last thing you need when you're in front of that room is for your stakeholders to give two slightly conflicting messages that you need to somehow make sense of for your audience. Yeah, that's not going to help your audience learn. And then certainly if they have disagreement, they view the world differently. The last thing you need is them to get into an argument in front of the room and then now they're having a debate and you're standing there and the audience is like, well, who do I listen to? Do I listen to stakeholder one, two, or three, or four? And they're all arguing. That's bad. So if you have multiple stakeholders that are going to be present during the training, you're going to have some radical candor and some uncomfortable conversations and clearly tell them, hey, this, as you're doing your prep work in the run up to the workshop, if you start to sense that they're not on the same page, hey, y'all got to go figure this out, because the last thing we need is to get in front of our room and then now you all are not on the same page. That would not be good whatsoever. So make sure everybody is on the same page. All right, and that kind of leads into point number 4, preparation. I mean, this is all pretty basic trainer prep planning stuff anyway. It's not anything different than what we would normally do. But when you're going to conduct training alongside your stakeholders and they're in the room, your planning has to be on point. Your preparation has to be on point. Certainly everybody knows the game plan, everybody knows the objective, everybody knows the agenda, all that. But you also have to make sure that everybody understands their roles, and you got to reinforce it and repeat it. I am the facilitator as the trainer. My job is to create the environment in which learning can take place. You are the stakeholder. Your job is to chime in and give your opinion here, to respond to the learning activity there, to sit back and observe as the trainees are doing their thing and you're drawing information from it at this time block. And then at this time block, you're going to do an opening, you're going to do a closing. Whatever the game plan is, it doesn't matter. But you got to make sure those roles and responsibilities are very clear. Have a kickoff meeting, certainly during your preparation in the run up to the meeting, make sure that's all clear. The day of, you're having a kickoff meeting, half an hour before go time, and you're reminding everybody, your role is this, your role is this. We all agree, yes, no. Okay, here's what's going to happen if we start to get off track. I'm going to pull everybody back in. That's my job as like the game show host here, the facilitator. Your job, if I'm letting it go, let me let it go in a certain direction. So in other words, if we're having a really good conversation, I'm going to let that conversation go a little bit. So don't cut it off. Let me do that. I'll decide when we cut it off, when we shorten things, if we're off track, etc. So a lot of words to say there. You got to prepare 100%, and part of that preparation, make sure your stakeholders know and understand everybody's role. That will pay off in the session itself. So that's all before you even get into the room, right? You got to have clear objectives, simplified design, make sure everybody's on the same page, make sure you prep, and then part of that prep, everybody understands their roles. All right. What is your job then as the trainer? Like I said, you're the facilitator, right? And you're going to kind of have to take sort of a weird back seat, not weird, but you're responsible to create the environment where everybody can learn during the session. You're responsible to keep the session on track. You're responsible to check in with the agenda. You got to let the session breathe where it needs to breathe. You got to tighten it back up where you need to tighten it up. You got to go back and reinforce those key takeaways. You got to clarify your stakeholders' thoughts as they share them, especially if your stakeholders are maybe not so articulate. But you are creating this environment where the objectives are being met. You are charged of creating that environment. And let's unpack sort of two elements of your role as the trainer to create the environment. There's sort of two layers to that. One layer of that, yeah, see, you've got some folks out there joining us from MBT Nation. Great to have you with us. Leave me a comment. Let me know where you're from. Let me know what your thoughts are as we talk about what do you do as a trainer when your stakeholders want to participate during the session. So sort of two layers to creating an environment. Number one is I would recommend create a lighter environment, create a more relaxed environment. And here's why I say that. There's naturally going to be a little bit of awkwardness when your stakeholder is in the room, especially if you've never worked with them before. If you've worked with them before, then maybe that's a little different. But if you've never worked with them before, there's going to be that awkwardness. Who's leading? Who's following? Who's in charge? Can I say something here? Can I not say something here? You and the stakeholder are going to be making lots of eye contact as they're like, "Ooh, can I chime in? Can I not?" And they're raising their hand kind of awkwardly. There's already that natural tension. And then especially if your stakeholders maybe aren't so great at reading the room. It's not that they're bad people, it's just this is not their skill set, right? So lean towards creating a lighter environment. Even if the material is very serious, lean a little bit towards a lighter environment. And then if the material is not so life and death, lean way towards a lighter environment. And why I say that is it offsets the natural tension that might be there. It might not be outright tension, but that awkwardness that I just described, the lighter environment will negate that. So everybody will start to relax. Everybody, the stakeholder, and the audience will, everybody will kind of step back a little bit. And that's where learning can really naturally start to occur. So as the facilitator, as the trainer who's working alongside your stakeholders, create a lighter environment. The other element towards the environment you want to create to lead towards overall success is that you're trying to keep the train on the track, keep everything focused, keep everything going in the right direction, all these sorts of things. You want to create the environment where your objectives are met for the session, point number one, all the way back to that, but your stakeholders are the superstars. You want to set it up. This is not your meeting. This is not your platform. You are there to support the stakeholders. And it's a delicate dance because you're trying to control the room and you're trying to control the agenda, keep things on track, but you want to keep giving it back to the stakeholders. Hey, stakeholder, what do you think? Hey, stakeholder, what are your final thoughts? Hey, stakeholder, let's expand on this a little bit more. Do you have an example of when you've navigated a situation like this? Hey, stakeholder, you're always kind of bringing it back to them. You're creating the environment where they can shine, and certainly where your learners can shine. That's the most important, is that your learners are learning. But especially when you're training alongside a stakeholder, as the facilitator, and you're used to working solo quite a bit, you're going to have to kind of fight that urge and kind of step back and push them forwards in a way that's not going to distract from the objective. It's not going to detract from the agenda. It's not going to detract from where you're trying to go. Make the shareholder or the stakeholder the star. If there's more than one, of course, you're going to have to juggle quite a bit. That's where all the prep work and understanding your roles comes into play as well, that we talked about just a minute ago. If you do all your prep work and everybody understands their roles, then the likelihood of people kind of getting creative during the session, in other words, a stakeholder who doesn't really understand training and learning suddenly wants to pipe up during the session. I've got a great idea. Now, that doesn't mean they might not have a great idea, and you, as the facilitator, should entertain it, but you should set it up in the beginning that you're going to be kind of the gatekeeper. And then during a break or maybe that evening, you think about, well, then how do we shoehorn that request into the agenda for tomorrow or later on? But part of that is making sure that you're making the stakeholder the star. So if you have a clear objective and you prep right and you spend lots of time prepping and you define your roles and responsibilities and you create this sort of lighter atmosphere, it's so much easier to make the stakeholder the star. Let it be their meeting. All right. So there's some all sorts of points about how do you manage a training session when your stakeholders are participating alongside you as co-trainers, co-presenters. Here's some more. As the trainer, you're going to have to check your ego. Going to have to check your ego, especially if you know the material really well. If you know the job role that you're training, you know the activities that the training or the people that you're training would normally be involved in. You're going to have to check your ego because your stakeholders are likely going to say stuff you don't necessarily agree with personally. And that's where you need to step back and say, what is the direction of the organization? Is what they say in line with that? If it is, keep your mouth shut. Is it in line with what they want to do inside their own area of responsibility that you're just there to support? If it is, guess what? You got to keep your mouth shut. You're going to have to check your ego. They're going to say things you don't necessarily agree with. They're going to say some cringy things, probably. Again, not because they're bad people. It's just this is not their skill set. If you ran If you went and jumped into one of their daily meetings, you would probably say something goofy too, trying to conduct their meeting for them, like a daily operational meeting. Well, now they're in your world. They're probably going to say something that, a little jarring. That's okay. You got to, again, is it in line with the company ethos and directive and policies and practices? Is it in line with their area of responsibilities, policies and practices and ways of doing things and ethos? Is it how they want things to be done in their area? You're there to support it. Even if you as a person, especially if you've done that job before or you know how that job's supposed to be done, you know what? Your opinion really doesn't matter. And that's a difficult role that's a difficult balance to strike. Now, I'm not saying that as a trainer, you might not interject new ideas, new ways of thinking about things. But those need to be cleared with the stakeholders on the front end. They need to know that's coming as part of the planning process. They need to know it's coming with all your discussions. It needs to tie into the objective. And you do not want to introduce new thoughts, ideas, frameworks, approaches that will conflict with what the stakeholders want. Again, you're there to serve them. So, as a trainer, you might want to put your ego to the side. And maybe ego is the wrong word, but your knowledge of the organization, you're going to kind of have to keep that in check. And then the next piece while you're conducting the training is being gracious. Being gracious. Your stakeholders are not trainers. They don't understand how people learn. And your goal is to support them. Your goal is to help your stakeholder shine, to reinforce what it is they're trying to do, to reinforce the objective you're trying to achieve. You're there in a support role. So be gracious. They're probably going to say stuff that's a little cringy. They're probably going to say stuff that doesn't make sense or it comes out a bit, they tell people what to do at a point where they shouldn't tell people what to do. They should be letting people figure it out for themselves. But they're not going to walk in the room and use Socratic delivery styles. They're not going to come in and know Bloom's taxonomy and Maslow's hierarchy and, chunking and scaffolding. And they're not going to know to ask a question and just they're not going to know all the trainer stuff. And that's okay because their job and their role is not necessarily to train. It's to help meet the session objective for their area of responsibility. So be a little gracious, and also be a little humble. Part of that being humble is learn from them. Sometimes as trainers, we get so good at what we do. If I could be a little bold in saying that, we get so comfortable, maybe is a better way to say it. We get so comfortable being in front of that room, running the show, doing our thing. It's easy to kind of forget that there's lots of other people in the organization who have a deep understanding of how the organization is supposed to work. There's lots of other people inside the organization who passionately care about the success of the organization and the success of the people in your training room. There's lots of other people who learn things that maybe you haven't learned yet. So you got to be a little humble while you're up there too. Now, as a certified no boring trainer, there's a certain swagger you need to bring to the training session, but don't let your swagger that you use to help people learn become a barrier to you learning. So let the stakeholders, whether you have 1, 10, or how many ever in the room with you, let them say their piece. Be a little gracious and be a little humble and learn from them. I shared at the top of this MBT live that I just conducted a workshop with a couple stakeholders, and I got to tell you, I learned a lot of great stuff. Learned a lot of great things that kind of made me think in a different way or take a different approach. Um, and it was a really great experience because they're in the trenches doing the thing that we were there to train. They're in it to win it. Now, in this particular case, I had done that role, but I hadn't done it since, going on 7 years now, 6, 7 years. So to let them shine and learn from them was really great. Really expanded my knowledge that I could then take that and then design, develop, and deliver trainings relative to this topic that we were training on and add new things. So be gracious, be humble. All right, enough soapboxing on that. Last point for today. So far, we've talked about if you're going to deliver training with your stakeholders in the room as co trainers, co presenters, co facilitators, here's how you do it to avoid disaster. One, laser focus, clear objectives. Two, simplify your design. Don't get too cute, don't get too complicated. Make sure that everybody is on the same page in terms of the content that's going to be delivered. Prepare often, thoroughly, completely, and as part of that preparation, make sure everybody understands their roles. Create a light atmosphere during the session, even if it's really serious material. Create an environment where the objectives are met and your stakeholders are the star. You're the facilitator. You're just there to keep it on the track, but the meeting is really about making sure the stakeholders are the star of the show. Check your ego, especially if they say something you don't necessarily agree with. Be gracious and be a little bit humble. And then the last tip, and there's many other tips. If we talked, if we did an hour long NBT live, we could probably keep going here. But my last tip, keep reminding the room of the key takeaways, especially if you get off track. But in general, you're just constantly going back and reinforcing the key takeaways. And here's why I say that. Number one, you should be doing that anyway, whether the stakeholders are in the room, not in the room, whether you give the stakeholder the design and they give it, whether you're as the trainer in there by yourself, you should constantly be reinforcing those key takeaways, constantly revisiting them all the time. But especially if your stakeholders are in the room, because what's likely to happen is you're going to get a little off track. You're probably going to deviate away from your agenda at least a little bit. They're probably going to try to cram in a little extra information. And as you do that, your audience tends to lose sight of what the key takeaways are. So it's on you as the trainer, facilitator, to reinforce those key takeaways, especially if you have an ad hoc deviation. All of a sudden you're going along teaching the agenda, and then all of a sudden a conversation comes up, and then your stakeholder chimes in, and then people start responding, and then your stakeholder keeps talking, and next thing you know, you're 10 minutes into it, and you're like, oh my God, draw them back to that objective, the key takeaways that are going to get them to the session objective. Yeah, that's cool that you took a little deviation, and especially if it was good material and you as the trainer kind of let it go a little bit because you felt like it was worthwhile. Even in that case, bring them back to the key takeaways. Here's why I say that. Number one, like I said, you're probably likely to get off track. Number two, your stakeholders are not usually gifted, skilled trainers. So they're just going to just sort of blah, here's a bunch of information. Not that it's bad, but it's just stream of consciousness and the key takeaways get watered down. You're going to take a lot of deviations just through the nature of having your stakeholders in the room. Remind the audience of your key takeaways regularly at the start of every day, at the start of every module, throughout the module, at the end of the day, in your participant communication feed. If you have a Slack channel or a Teams channel and you're putting out even more additional content after the meeting, go back and hammer those key takeaways. Then start of the next day, hit the key. Yesterday, here's what we covered, and the key takeaways are blah, blah, blah. Go back and hammer it. Here's another reason why I say that. Your session effectiveness will be judged on whether the audience takes your information, remembers your information, and acts on the information. You'll get some sort of approval or judgment from the stakeholders in the aftermath of the meeting. Hey, that was a great meeting. Good job. That really Well, I really like this, blah, 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 as you're doing your daily debriefs, or even as the meeting ends and everybody leaves and it's just you and the stakeholders, and they're going to give you some feedback right then and there. Awesome. Great. But the true measure, as we all know, is, do people retain and use that information later on to affect a business outcome? If they don't remember and use that information for a business outcome, guess who they're going to blame? Do, 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 do. Yeah, they're going to blame the training, and they're going to blame you, not in a bad way, not like in a finger pointing, bad sort of way, but they're going to go, well, that was a really cool meeting, but nothing really changed. Nobody, we're just still doing the same old thing. you know, Forget the fact that the stakeholder didn't follow up. Forget the fact that the stakeholder didn't go and reinforce the message. Forget the fact that, the stakeholder got back to daily life and kept doing the same old thing. And now their people are following suit. Forget all that. They're going to look at the training and blame the training. So you have a fighting chance to get people to remember the information and change their behavior if you, as the trainer in the room, the facilitator, you are constantly reinforcing the key takeaways. All right. And then one more bonus piece of advice. The last thing to make this work, you have to have clear follow up. You need to drive that follow up process. And that could look different. I won't get into a million different ways to structure it because it's all going to depend on what you're training and the topic and the organization and the groups and all that. But having a crystal clear follow up, whether it's you structure touch bases for the stakeholders and you put touch base meetings on your stakeholders' calendar for them to meet with their team, whether you give your stakeholders talking points to reinforce in the next team meeting, whether you develop checklist for your stakeholders, whether you go ahead and just schedule a group get together in a month's time frame, whatever. There's a million different ways to do it. You need to drive that ship because the stakeholders are busy. They're busy people. That's why they're stakeholders, right? I'm not knocking on them, but they're going to get back after this workshop to a mountain of emails and a mountain of work and a mountain of Teams messages, Slacks and whatnot. And they're going to go back to daily life. But then when the training isn't effective and nobody changed their behavior and we didn't impact the business outcome, then they go, oh, well, that was a neat workshop, but nothing really changed. So drive the follow-up ship for them. Make it easy for them. Make their life easy to do the training follow-up and the training reinforcement. Make it easy. Make the content for them. Don't rely on them to do it. So there you go, NBT Nation. There's a of whole bunch of practical things you can do when you're asked to deliver a training and the stakeholders want to participate alongside you. And I can tell you, I've experienced this many times in the past, but I just experienced it recently. And I got to tell you, it's absolutely fantastic. The one stakeholder that really prompted this most recent workshop is just a wonderful person who really cares, really wants to do a great job, really is dialed in, really laser focused. They really want to drive success in their little chunk of the world. And to partner with them and help them drive towards that success, it's just fun. It's exhilarating. It's exciting. So it's not something you should be nervous about or scared of. But there's definitely things you need to do to set this up for success. Because if you just go in there and try to wing it, you're going to get conflict and friction, and everybody's going to be trying to lead the dance in the room, and your audience will suffer. The people we're trying to help the most. So that's not good. So there you have it, NBT Nation. A whole bunch of tips. Which one's been your favorite? Let me know. Leave me some comments in the chat feed, even if you're watching this on the replay. Let me know what you think. And then, as I mentioned at the top of the MBT Live, coming soon, the new ebook, The Hard Truths of Becoming a No Boring Trainer. It's going to be available at noboringtraining.com. And of course, I will be all over social media channels over the coming week or so to promote when it drops, how you can go about getting it. So there you go, NBT Nation. I hope everybody has a great rest of your Monday. Thanks for joining me, and hope everybody has a great holiday week.